Scripture today comes from the Old Testament, from the 3rd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. I'm reading from the King James translation for reasons that will become apparent in a few moments. But if you would care to follow along in the Pew Bible that is near you, it can be found on page 616 of the Old Testament. If you do, please be aware of the differences in the text from the Old Testament. Let's now listen to and for God's Word coming to us from the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes, beginning with verse 1 and ending with verse 10. To everything there is a season, the time to every purpose under heaven. The time to be born, the time to die. The time to plant, the time to pluck up that which is planted. The time to kill, and a time to heal. The time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. What profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboureth? I have seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Please bow with me now in prayer. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It's almost impossible for me, at least, to think of the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes without thinking of the song that the Byrds sang back in the late 1960s. For everything there is a season, turn, 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 the time, every purpose under heaven. I suppose that it's only fitting that the text of my final sermon in active ministry should be set to music, because music has been such an important part of my faith. In fact, as I come to the point of reviewing the activities of my ministry, it was the use of music in telling the stories of the Bible many, many years ago, long before there was something called the genre of Christian music. That was the theme of the smallest youth retreat I ever led. 3 people. Be able to find our way into Scripture through songs from the Beatles and the Bee Gees, those who are old enough to remember them. But I digress. The writer of Ecclesiastes is called Couplet, though some will disagree. Penned those words to illustrate the fact that in his opinion, life was this ever-revolving cycle of activity that just kept repeating itself over and over and over again. I can still remember my Old Testament professor making the sound of train wheels as the commuter trains rolled down the track going clack, 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 clack. Kohelet's notion was that it would stay that way forever. Well, there certainly is no doubt that there are patterns in life that do keep repeating themselves. Though they may slightly be different, that does not mean that God's activity is lost in their repetition. To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, says Kohelet. A time to give birth and a time to die. Well, I've not experienced either one, and I know I would experience at least one. But theologically, they might be said that they represent original sacraments of the church in baptism and in funerals. It's probably a sign of our denomination that I've done far fewer baptisms than I have funerals. For over the years, of 40 years of ministry, I've baptized 29 children, including both of our sons, which is kind of a passing back and forth act in our denomination. But the most memorable was a young girl who was as quiet as could be nearing slumber, who was about to be baptized. As soon as the mother placed her in my arms, she let out a scream that would rival the 11 o'clock siren. And in the screaming, she projectiled her pacifier across the chancel floor. She would not stop screaming, and it was hard to project my words over her screaming, so there was only one thing left to do: baptize the pacifier. So it was picked up, dunked in the water, and stuck back in her mouth like that. She was a piece. All I can say is, isn't God great? Funerals, however, are another matter. In 40 years of officiating at funerals, I've officiated at 296 funerals. That's a lot. If statistics are accurate, that's more than the average size of the Presbyterian church these days. But it's not my fault, believe me. In fact, it still boggles my mind that in the early years of my ministry in 1975, I was officiating for people who had been born 20 years after the Civil War. When I told my wife that, she said, "That makes you sound old." But not as old as it's been said of me in this congregation. I certainly was born far after the disciples of Christ walked the earth, and far after the signers of the Declaration we got together to sign. But no funeral is easy, and some are more difficult than others. Early in my ministry, I learned the difficulty for anyone who is asked to officiate or grieve for a person who is younger than they are. One of my early funerals was for a woman who was 60 years old and whose 90-year-old mother was in absolute grief. But the hardest of all are children. And the hardest of my ministry was for a boy who died of sudden infant death syndrome at the age of 4 months. My theological underpinning and my years as a hospital chaplain had not prepared me in any way for that kind of experience. For so much of my understanding of Christ and of Christ's ministry and of Christ's promise is that we all carry bits of eternity of the people we love, and they are tied to the memories that we hold. But if a child is young, how many memories are there really to collect and rely on? I left that service feeling that I had not been able to share any words of comfort to the young mother and her husband. But again, in God's mercy, that mother came in a few weeks later to talk to me, and she came to the conclusion that while her memories were few, she could continue to create good memories of her son by starting a foundation, the funds of which would go to help sudden infant death syndrome research. And so she started in this city what became known as Michael's Run, and I believe it is still taking place. Over the years, Michael's Run has raised thousands of dollars for research of sudden infant death syndrome, and it has given her fabulous memories. And all I can say is, isn't God great? To everything there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, says Coelho. Over the years I've pondered that a great deal. For why, if there is so much joy among God's people, do we actually talk about laughter very seldom? In fact, it doesn't appear very much in the Bible except in the book of Psalms. Especially, I wonder about those people who are called by others the frozen chosen. Can we really laugh? I don't remember children's sermons, which is the place where I put a lot of the laughter that I experienced in church. Coming out of the church in Milwaukee, my first congregation, though I do remember it. It was part of the lifeblood and the fabric of the church in Illinois, in which I served. When I came to Irvington Presbyterian Church, some of you will remember that we celebrated children's sermon only on the third Sunday of the month. But the rest of the time, except in the summer, worship was an adult affair. But laughter and children's sermon became more frequent as time came on. The most memorable to me was one children's sermon that I was delivering the first Sunday of Advent, which almost always falls the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So the children gathered as they always do. And I decided to ask the children a question, which in seminary they had said never do, because you don't know what they're going to say. So I asked the assembled group of children, what's the next holiday? And without fail, one of them yelled out, Hanukkah! Because I had completely forgotten that we had a bi-religious child. You don't hear that term very often in our church school. And he was absolutely right. So we had to cover religious holidays of both great religions in one service. I don't know if there's been a lot of dancing in the church, although I understand there's been some. There's been some down at the Seniors Gone Wild, and I know at least one service during the holidays, a couple promenaded and swirled down the center aisle. Ecclesiastes says a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. This part of Ecclesiastes was somewhat difficult over the years in churches I served, with people reading reports of how congregation members might be sued because they shook a hand with too much strength, or someone was afraid that they might pass cold germs or food germs from one another. There have been times when we welcomed with the shake of the hand, and times when we have not. I have always threatened that what we ought to do is practice the early church tradition of kissing one another on the cheek. And I don't think those of us who are part of the Puritan tradition would find that really comfortable. So we will struggle perhaps with how to welcome people into the household of God as we worship. Thank goodness to a certain extent that the prohibition on coffee cups and water bottles has died. Ecclesiastes says there's a time to tear apart, a time to sow. Well, I don't believe that I've been responsible for any marriages falling apart. I do know that there have been quite a few over the years, some 48 couples I have married. 3 stand out as memorable, though, in different ways, one from each congregation. IPC's memory is that of officiating at the wedding of our son, Michael, to his beautiful wife, Heather, who together have given us 3 gorgeous grandchildren. We are thankful for that. And by the way, that's the only family story I'm going to tell, because I don't know. But in Illinois, the first time that I had a young couple asked to receive communion at their wedding. And to this day, after 38 years, that communion service as part of the wedding is part of the packet that I give couples when they want to get married. And I'm thankful for having had that experience. But the most joyous and memorable really comes from Milwaukee. When during a wedding service, there was a pause, and I had to walk down what were long pulpit steps to stand in front of the couple who was getting married to deliver the homily, as they still do. Well, that was a rather long pause, and it must have been rather uncomfortable for a young little boy about 4 years old who had on the cutest little sailor outfit I had ever seen in my life. And as I left the pulpit in that silence and stood in front of the pulpit, this young boy stood up on the pew, and with all of his might, he yelled out, "Oh, shut up!" And all I could do to redeem my composure was shake my hand and say, "Isn't God great?" To everything, there is a time of war and a time of peace. I came into the ministry, unfortunately for me, 2 years after the peace accord that ended war in Vietnam. So it may be only fitting that as I am in full-time ministry, our troops are coming out of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, to me at least, of the 40 years I've spent in full-time ministry, half of them, 20 years, our country has been at war in one place or another. Short-term conflicts like Grenada or Panama have escaped from our memories, and our minds remember the Gulf War, and Iraq, and Afghanistan, and Iran. And all I can say is, thank God for their ending, and pray that our sons and daughters will remember war no more. And for their ending, God is great. Now, if the writer of Ecclesiastes is correct, and these things will continue to live out in our lives may very well at times say, isn't God great? And isn't God wonderful? And at other times we might surely wonder, what in the heck is God doing? But through it all, for me at least, the baptisms, the funerals, the children's sermons, the dancing, the weddings, the greetings, the war, as well as the peace, I've become absolutely convinced that the words of St. Paul that Bob read earlier this morning are absolutely accurate. Neither life, nor death, nor angels, nor principality, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor heights, nor depths, nor anything